The fascinating making of the Abyss documentary begins with a shot of Jim Cameron in his dive suit, submerged underwater and coming forth out of a featureless black background, lit only by a hazy shaft of blue light from an off-screen source and by a torch attached to his helmet. He announces,
"I'm James Cameron, and I want to take you into a world of cold, darkness, and unrelenting pressure. The movie business."
He thus establishes a parallel between his own journey in making the movie and the story within the movie itself. At the time The Abyss was made, Cameron seemed to psychologically inhabit a mindscape of darkness occasionally punctured by electronic light beams, and this juxtaposition between light and dark usually resulted in a cold blue haze. This was present in the first two Terminator films, which contain a lot of night scenes. The first Terminator is almost entirely a night footage film, with even the indoor scenes often occurring in spotlit darkness and with an emphasis on metallic architecture. This wasn't necessary for the story, but it did allow the city to take on a subliminal appearance that mirrors the post-nuclear future scenes. And both sets of scenes seem to be filmed with blue lighting gels, which wasn't necessary, but it did give the film a cold look fitting with the emotionless nature of the Terminator. So I suppose the use of only night scenes and only darkly lit underground tunnels for the future scenes establishes that humanity is trapped in a time of great darkness. And both Kyle Reese and the Terminator dress in bland grey, the colour of steel. When it came to the movie Aliens, Cameron may have been partially attracted to the visually dark style of the first Alien movie. The alien planet itself is in almost permanent night. Even when the sun rises, there's not enough atmosphere to brighten up the sky. Alien was filmed with an alternating, organic, fleshy colour palette of browns and warm skin tones contrasted against the black and grey colours of decay. And so one of the key visual changes in Cameron's sequel was to change the colour palette to a domination of black and blue. This is uncompromisingly established in the opening space shots and the discovery of Ripley in hypersleep. Interior shots are clinical and, with the exception of the hospital, are mostly a variety of dull greys and claustrophobically tight spaces. The rest of the film mostly follows this pattern of alternating between black and blue lit environments, with the light frequently coming from torches held by the characters, and clinical metallic environments. This is broken up in a few places by explosive fire or deep red lighting similar to the infrared vision of the Terminator. And even though the planet LV-426 has acquired a breathable atmosphere, there still is no daytime coloration, just some dull cloud coverage. In terms of emotionally toned visuals, the Terminator films and Aliens are essentially set in the same black and blue, permanent nighttime universe, with the characters alternatively inhabiting industrial metallic structure environments and lighting their hazy way with directorial torch beams and strobe light. But with The Abyss, Cameron's edge to depict and inhabit such an environment was taken to the next level. The Abyss is the bluest film I've ever seen. In real ocean footage, a blue haze tends to occur closer to the surface where cloudless blue skies provide the blue diffuse to the water. But in deeper dives, the footage tends not to be as specifically blue as it is in The Abyss. I suspect Cameron has used a lot of blue filtering again, either in the camera or in the lights themselves. And the rig environment again provides the kind of metallic pipes and panel structures that Cameron was so fond of in Terminator and Aliens. And a lot of these interiors also have a blue tinge cast on them by windows or the moon pool. But even all that wasn't enough. After the crane is dragged into the sea and severely damages the rig, the living environment is cast into the kind of smoky, partially lit darkness found in key scenes of the Terminator and Aliens. So now we're right at home in Cameron's universe. And then there's prop coloration, typically following the same colour pattern: blue uniforms and overalls, blue helicopters, Lindsay's blue dress, Kirkhill's blue tie, Bud's blue jeans and blue cap. Bud's hand even gets stained in blue dye. And even though the aliens are supposed to be colourful, blue is still a dominant colour in their lighting and architecture. Wouldn't the emerging city be better having some other colour that contrasted it against the rest of the blue depths, say like gleaming white or gold perhaps? My interpretation of all this is that Cameron has a twofold attraction and repulsion to these kinds of blue nighttime industrial settings. As outlined in detail in a chapter of my video Militarism in the Movies of Jim Cameron, The director has a love-hate relationship with industry and technology, but I also believe he has a love-hate relationship with the cold isolation of these nighttime settings. On the one hand, he consciously uses such environments to depict the struggles for his characters, be it repressed emotion, loneliness, confusion or fear. Yet on the other hand, I think the super intelligent, super creative James Cameron has the artist's standard requirement of isolation in order to apply his imagination. And such artists are often night owls. That's when the creative juices can really flow with less external distraction. But this carries another contradictory facet. The artist often has an emotional disconnection from other people that they're trying to overcome. They use art to communicate in metaphors that which they're unable to openly express in words and emotional gestures. Sometimes words are insufficient actually, which is why art remains extremely important in the human psyche, even in the age of academic dominance of conscious thought. And sometimes art is a cathartic outlet for expressing what the artist or society refuses to consciously acknowledge. A good example of this transference is when the lead character in Titanic expresses his sexual attraction to the lead female by drawing a lovely, artistic picture of her. Incidentally, Titanic is another movie dominated by night shots and darkness, and which features a protective white knight damsel in distress relationship, where the ultimate relationship bond is instigated by mutual trauma. But after Titanic, Cameron began to ease off a bit on the industrial blue night imagery. True Lies has more daytime footage than Cameron's previous films, and Avatar takes the increased use of daylight further by showing lots of nature, albeit an ironically artificial alien planet nature. Greenery is very rare in Cameron's movies, and my favourite example of his avoidance of it is this shot in Aliens. Lovely forest scenery and sounds, pull out and switch off the artificial image. And as commented on by some critics, there's hardly any sea life in the abyss. I don't think there's even any coral plants, though this will be partially attributable to the chlorine-heavy water that the crew were filming in. Any sea life placed in that water would likely have died. But surely some alternate cutaway footage of actual sea life could have been added to the film in places, or plastic artificial coral could have been used in the sets. The only prominent sea life image in the film, aside from the aliens, is the brown parasite-like thing coming out of a dead guy's mouth. And weirdly, there's a plant in a pot here. But how could an air-based plant grow and survive in the sunless depths of the rig, unless it's a fake plant? This general absence of natural greenery in Cameron's films can be considered to be unhealthy, as plants are essential to human living. Another reason I believe Cameron is drawn to isolation and darkness of the kind depicted in his movies is that he was a massive enthusiast of deep-sea diving. For example, he went on to make the documentary Ghosts of the Abyss, where he explored the wreck of the actual Titanic, just as the characters in The Abyss explore a wrecked submarine. Not only are the ocean depths visually dark, but they are literally inhospitable to human beings, yet Cameron's still drawn to these environments, like an extreme version of being a night owl. In the cases of the wrecked Titanic in Ghosts of the Abyss and the crashed submarine in The Abyss, there's an additional parallel of death and tragedy. In The Abyss, freshly drowned men float about like animated zombies, each one alone in the void. The dead bodies of the Titanic are of course degraded to the point where finding anything resembling a full skeleton is unlikely, but instead the occupants are depicted in the film's title as ghosts, and the film juxtaposes the wreck against renditions of what the ship looked like with live crew on board. So Cameron could have a kind of attraction to the peaceful isolation of ghosthood, which is actually common in the horror genre. People like the idea of ghosts and an afterlife, and they like the idea of being able to fly through walls and so on. But with claustrophobic isolation and darkness, even if those conditions are chosen, inevitably comes danger. The danger that one can become permanently stuck in that environment is certainly present in The Abyss in the physical sense. Submarines crashing into walls, and US and Russian submarines colliding in darkness during the story, although we don't actually get to see that. But the danger of chosen isolation in darkness is also true at the emotional level. One character gets high-pressure nervous syndrome, which is a nice metaphor in itself for the paranoia and hostility that can thrive in self-imposed isolation. As one character says,
"Hang on, boys, it's all downhill from here."
Cameron says in the making-of documentary that the film is about bonding under pressure, but I think it's as much about conflict under pressure. The pressure of being closed into a space with someone you then can't get away from. And this was true on the set. The film industry pressures that Cameron spoke of seem to have caused some bonding and a lot of conflict during the shoot. Cast and crew and director were locked in together by their filming contracts. Something else that really strikes me about this cold, blue, dark industrial setting in the Abyss is how dominating it is in near enough every way. We're given virtually no information about the land-based lives of the characters. The novelisation by Orson Scott Card thankfully added some nice background story to the three main characters, but it's so lacking in the movie that it's as if land-based civilization doesn't exist. It's like the characters have never been out of the ocean, like the ocean depths are the world. There's so little visual warmth in this movie, it's so lonely that there's no fish, and even the neon strobe aliens can't uplift the feeling. They're like Christmas tree lights thrust into the darkness in a half-hearted attempt to brighten our spirits, but blue is still the dominating colour. Even the water tentacle the aliens create has bluish-purple vision instead of some bright, inspired point of view. And its trippy LSD lens view and accompanying ethereal music feels like that of an emotionally disconnected figure, a ghost lost in the void. To summarise, I think the whole visual style of nighttime blue and claustrophobic steel tunnels in Cameron's early films essentially represents aspects of his frame of mind when these films were made. An artistically and technically creative genius who felt somewhat isolated from others, partially out of distrust, but who also chose that emotional isolation in order to more effectively pursue his cinematic visions.